Illinois state lawmakers back at it today. They've got, of course, just a handful of weeks before the end of legislative session for spring session, and they're going to wrap up, I believe, May 19th. So we're looking at like 4 weeks or so of legislative action, which includes them passing hundreds of bills out of both chambers, and then also tackling the state's budget. And the state's looking to spend nearly $50 billion. That's more than what they spent the year before. And looks like a whole bunch of money for early childhood education. The governors are going to be advocating for that at the State House today with a rally. You also have a lot of money for K through 12 education. About $1 out of every $5 is going to go to pensions for the state of Illinois, and a whole host of other spending, including infrastructure and salaries and so on, public health and the state's workforce development, and a whole host of agency spending. But one thing that obviously is a factor here is how Illinois is dominated by Democrats, and how Republicans they don't necessarily have as much of a voice as they would like to think they have, because there are super majorities in both the Senate and the House, meaning Democrats don't need any Republican support. So the governor, and we'll talk more about what he had to say in New York yesterday when he was going to pitch the state of Illinois' bonds, which means debt, looking to put Illinois in more debt at taxpayer expense that will have to pay interest on that debt. So we'll talk about that a little bit more next hour. The one thing that came up yesterday at the tail end of his presentation to bond buyers, he injected something into the conversation that he's talked about before, and that's Democrat rule in Illinois and how he sees it as a positive in the state's, quote, getting things done. So here's the governor at the tail end of a investors briefing in New York, where he laid out his understanding of what's going to be going on in the state legislature, and urging the investors to take a look at it.
I want, for all of you who are closely following, our legislature has really done a great job over the last few years of being aligned in our goal to lift up our credit, to make sure that we're doing the right things fiscally for the state. And I hope you pay attention to that as we head into the last part of the session here, because if we weren't cooperating, if we were, fighting one another, well, you'd be back in the situation we were in before I became governor. But also that the leaders in the legislature really do understand that this is how we make a real, solid future, and that it's, I should add, and maybe this should give you some confidence, that it's been politically beneficial for the Democrats in the legislature to do the right thing for our fiscal future, because we won the elections in what was supposed to be a red wave year in November of 2022, in part because people who were going door to door running for the legislature were able to say, we Democrats balance the budget. We Democrats are the fiscally responsible party. We're the ones who got credit upgrades for the state. Republicans voted against every one of those budgets. They're in the super minority. They couldn't have stopped them, but the truth is that they didn't vote for the balanced budgets that we got. And I think that's just an important recognition. One thing to have a governor who's, I think, heading in the right direction for the state, but another thing for us all collectively to be, working together to do the right things for the state. So it's again, a harder thing to do, but that's something that we've done. That's
Governor J.B. Pritzker yesterday in New York, talking to bond investors and highlighting the state's uniparty approach to budgeting and policymaking, and urging these investors to, hey, take a close look at what's going on in Illinois. Just a bit of background on the recent budgetary issues. Let's going back maybe 8 years, right? So former Governor Pat Quinn loses to Republican Governor Bruce Rauner. Rauner comes in as a reformer. He's wanting to rework public employee contracts. He's wanting to bring about structural change to address the deficit. But he had a Democrat-controlled legislature, and as a Republican, it's like mixing oil and water. water. And then you had a standoff of sorts between Rauner and House Speaker Michael Madigan, who right now is facing 23 different counts of corruption. But there was this back and forth for 2.5 years practically. And I remember covering this. I was standing outside the governor's office for hours on end, staking it out, waiting for the leaders to come out after meetings and all the conversations that there were. But the first budget that the State House tried to pass with Rauner at the helm passed, but then the second year budget came around and the House passed a budget that was like $7 or $8 billion out of balance. The governor said he's not going to sign that. They kicked it back, and then they passed another one. It wasn't balanced. The governor wouldn't sign it. That went on for more than 2 years. We had a budget impasse. And that led to a whole host of structural problems, from how do we pay these short-term bills? How do we even pay the long-term bills? The bill backlog racked up to $16 billion plus and all the interest that there was on that. So you had this political mess in creating a budget with a Republican who wanted to shore up spending versus Democrats who wanted to either spend more or listen, these are motivations that others even talk about. Were they just trying to gum up the works to make Rauner look bad? And that's, of course, something, again, Mike Madigan was at the helm of controlling the process of which bills were being brought up and which bills would ultimately pass, and passing incredibly out-of-balanced budgets that Rauner just wouldn't sign. And then it came to, this grand bargain where they passed a budget and included an income tax increase and so on. So that's a little bit of the history of the Rauner years. And then Pritzker gets in with that, Democrat Party dynamic. They control both the House and the Senate and then the executive. He's able to pass budgets, and he's able to say year after year, we passed a balanced budget. But you look at it, and there's still a lot of deficits there. So the governor, again, hinting that, hey, Republicans didn't support the quote, balanced budget that Democrats passed, and Democrats use that in political conversations with their constituents going door to door. Well, Senate Minority Leader John Curran responded to that yesterday at a separate news conference where Republicans are trying to push for substantive reforms to Illinois' business climate, including, tax credits for a variety of things, getting rid of the estate tax, getting rid of the franchise tax, and a whole host of other things. Curran responded directly to the governor saying, hey, Republicans haven't been part of the budget process.
So I would go back to the 2021 budget that Republicans did not support, and there were no votes on, that the governor is pointing to. And that was a budget that raised significant taxes on business and has put us behind in this state in competing with neighboring states throughout this nation for business. And we see the response from, the business community. And as was read off earlier, all these businesses, Senator DeWitt, leaving Illinois. So when the governor points to these past budgets, there are real consequences to these past budget initiatives that the Democratic majority has put in unilaterally in this state. And we've seen that response from the business community. So what we are doing today is giving voice to the business community. This is what the business community is telling us they need to re-engage, to stay here, to prosper. And that's the agenda we're bringing forward. We have not, the budget process right now is 5 weeks out. We've gotten the governor's proposal. We have not seen much of anything from the legislative leaders on the Democratic side with regards to this, other than we have had some conversations generally about, this is a good time to try to support the business community. It's been receptive. There's no commitment. There's no commitment that they support any of these initiatives, but we're going to champion. And this is what we're going to fight for, to try to get this included.
So again, some of the back and forth there between the governor saying, "Hey, our uniparty in Illinois is moving things forward, passing budgets and spending tax dollars," while Republicans are saying Democrats are doing a disservice to taxpayers and we don't have a thriving business community. Let's take a quick call here. Good morning. You're on WMAY.
Yeah, you did a real quick rush over of the Rauner years. Yeah. You forgot to add complete destruction of the state by him and his minions.
Well, but listen, I mean, it was Democrats at the helm of the Senate and the House that seemed to gum up the works without wanting to work with the Republicans. So is it solely on Rauner's shoulders, or do Democrats also have some fault there?
No, it's him and his staff. Make sure you get his staff included in there, too.
Well, sir, I got to say, though, I was covering that in detail when it was going on, and you can't enact unbalanced budgets, which is what Democrats passed on to the governor. At least the House tried to. The Senate didn't advance some of the House's proposals, but it wasn't just Rauner that was the cause of that budget impasse.
Look at our bond ratings. Come on, Greg.
Our bond ratings are the lowest in the country, tied with New Jersey. But if you don't want to stick around and have a conversation, I get it. It's just kind of how it goes, I guess. Yep, that's what it sounds like when somebody doesn't want to stick around for the conversation. Just putting it out there. All right, stay tuned.